Hello, hello, everybody, and thank you for watching Soul Talk. And I'm excited to have my guest on tonight. This is a very exciting time. We're going to be talking about her book. I'm hoping this shows up on the green screen. Rise Up, Awakening Through Revelation, 10 Days on the Ascension Path by Suzanne Ross. And even if you guys couldn't see that, it's going to have links in the description of the show down below. And also, just before we kind of jump into this a little bit, Suzanne has an amazing, rich experiences, and we're going to talk a lot about that over the next 30 minutes, but you can also check her out at SuzanneRossWellness.com. Suzanne, thank you for coming on the show today, and I'm looking forward to talking about your work on helping ascend the planet, is the way I would put it. And thank you so much for coming on. So this is your second
Jeremy, thank you for having me on your show, Soul Talk. I love your show, and it's an honor and a privilege to be a guest.
Yeah, thank you. And so this is your second book, right? This is your Wake Up. Wake Up was the first one. This was called Rise Up. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yes, it's an Up trilogy. So the first book is Wake Up. The second book is Rise Up. And Lighten Up is in the works. It's a series for the mind, the spirit, and the body.
It's funny you should say that. I always tell people all the time, I'm like, you guys make spirituality really not fun sometimes. You guys need to lighten up a little bit.
I had a fitness center for many years in Southern California called Lighten Up. And so I started out with Lighten Up as a title, but Spirit guided me, that I was being called to write 3 books in an Up trilogy. And the first one had to be for the mind, Wake Up, which is really about liberating your mind from limiting beliefs. And then the second book is much more metaphysical, because Spirit channeled through me that people aren't necessarily ready for that deeper, more metaphysical journey until they liberate their mind from limiting beliefs and sort of balance karma in this lifetime with more practical spirituality. Of course, it depends on where you're at on your journey. Many people have already, done that journey through waking up and are ready for the heavier metaphysical aspects that I present in Rise Up. And then Lighten Up is activating the light body.
Oh, lighten up. Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just lighten up. It's get step into the truth of light, that frequency, that higher frequency. Okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense. Very, very cool. So you write this in days, and so it's of course in the title of the book, 10 days, but each one, could you tell a little bit about each day of those 10 days and how that works? Is it it's like a lesson every day, am I correct? Or a way of thinking during this 10 days ascension?
Yes, and so the first book, Wake Up, is a workshop, and every day is a lesson, and it's all about learning the life lessons we came here to learn and then applying them to your life today. Rise Up is an adventure.
Gotcha.
And so each day we go on an adventure. In fact, we start out just by walking out your front door and taking a walk out in nature, what I refer to as walking meditations. And out in nature, you're really tuning in to all of the living things and beings out in nature, connecting with the life force energy in all things and beings, and getting that profound sense of oneness, also standing in awe of creation and starting to understand the true nature of reality. The book is very much focused in the beginning, especially on how creation came into being. So what better way to experience that than to be out in the natural world, in creation? And as you move through creation, you're inspired to notice how the sacred geometry shows up in form. We talk about the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean spiral. And so I inspire people to notice forms like the radiant spiral that is defined in all forms. And so you look at the flower and you see that everything expands from a point in the center. You throw a rock in the stream and see how it expands out in rippling waves. And then you start to understand how all of this relates to you, and how you too have points where everything expands out from the center and then further into creation, and how creation has a point in the center, a source, and everything expands from there. And then as the days continue, we actually go to sacred sites around the world. As we hike into these sacred sites, we talk about the cosmologies of these ancient cultures, what they believed, and they believed oftentimes in sky gods and star beings who came down and taught them advanced ways of living and being. And so we talk about the Egyptian mystery schools and the Mayan temples and how they were master timekeepers, and even the Dogon tribes in Africa, and how their cosmology is so similar to what we know of today as string theory. And they say they were taught by the sky gods too. And so it's really an adventure.
I always find that super interesting with the different ancient cultures and their symbolism, and how, if you parallel that to the things that we know now, and we're just looking at it from a different, scientists, I guess is the better way to put it, are looking from a different perspective. But you can look back and realize that these ancients understood things that, how did they see these things? And it just blows your mind away until you realize that they saw it through, what you would refer to as the one great self, I guess, is in your book, and you try to talk about that. And if they can see it from that multi-layered perspective, I guess is the way to put it, then they, that's how they were able to see things from the way they did. So, and had the experiences that they did. So it's good stuff.
Yes, I talk a lot about creator consciousness, and that really became the major focus and theme for the book. And with this creator consciousness, it's exactly what you're saying. Developing that knowing that you are of and from the divine source, you are an aspect of the creator. And as such, you are a creator. And when you start to develop that creator consciousness, then you can see through the eyes of the creative self that you are. I represent a lot of concepts about quantum physics. And the reason I do that is so that as a creator being, you understand more about the energetic realm, even to do with atoms and electron wave particle duality, so that you start to grasp this idea that you are creating your reality as you move through it. I love electron wave particle duality because it goes to show how our reality is literally waves of potential until an intelligent observer moves through it. And upon observing it, actually the waves transform into particles. So it's this wave particle duality of the electrons that really helps you understand that your reality is unfolding as you move through it, based on your expectations, based on your intentions. And of course, there's a co-creative aspect to it here in this third dimensional realm where we're sort of in this consensus reality, but also just the impact that you have on creating your own reality as you move through it.
Kind of reminds me of was it the double slit theory? Where they had the
Yeah.
particles, and then they put the camera on and then it didn't separate anymore. And I'm like, oh, So we're still looking at it from this visual perspective, but there's all these particles behind us. That's really, really powerful stuff. And it's interesting. Do you think that part of, I know this is a little bit off topic, but the co-creative consciousness, I guess is the way to put it, that you mentioned earlier. Do you think that's the feeling? Because there's always this feeling until somebody hits this state of being where they almost feel trapped, and they're trapped in the story of whatever their programming is and stuff like that. So Part of it, I think, is they feel that the co-creative aspect of it makes them feel, until they understand that they can co-create in oneness with each other, and they're in flow with that. I think there is a resistance to co-creative, the co-creative energy with some people. They're like, no, I'm here on my own, doing this all on my own. And then because of that resistance, they feel a lot of pain and anxiety and depression and that kind of stuff. And then when they finally step into that, hey, co-creation is flow, it's the flow of essence of all things, then they start seeing things differently, and then things start happening for them on a scale that they never could have possibly imagined. And do you think I think that what I've kind of looked at it as almost like a global post-traumatic stress of consciousness, because there's this resistance to anything that they deem taking away of their individuality.
Yes, certainly. I love the co-creative aspect of creating with others in the world around you, and the law of attraction, how you're always attracting like-minded people into your sphere. And of course, I live here in Sedona, and so the spiritual community here is a great example of people gathering in this spiritual mecca on the planet to be surrounded by like-minded people, co-creating a higher way of living and being from a spiritual perspective, very heart-centered and soul-inspired, and many of us dedicated to the awakening and ascension of humanity. And so, we're co-creating that on planet Earth together here as a community. And then also realizing that we're always co-creating with Source and all of the higher deities and angels and archangels and ascended masters, right, throughout the galaxy and even the universe.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing, is that resistance comes to their individuality. But then once they realize that they're individual and they're part of this huge consciousness, then they lose that resistance. And so I think that's part of the healing that the souls go through as a part of their term. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the 12 archetypal aspects of the one great self, expressing as 12 timelines in 12 dimensions, or each of the 12 dimensions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Early on my journey, I became fascinated by theosophy and the books by Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and even Dr. Joshua David Stone, who talked about these theosophical concepts where we have 144 soul extensions to make up our monad, that we as an eternal soul who always is, always has been, and always will be, is mentally projecting holographic fractals of its 12 personalities into 12 dimensions of time and space in order to know thyself through experience and to experience love. And so we talk about how in the beginning, when the one great self awoke in this infinite sea of pure consciousness, it became the divine Trinity. You could say the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And this divine Trinity sort of rested in this state of bliss and infinity, but then got restless and wanted to create, and realized they couldn't create in the fetters of infinity. And so they wanted to start a creation. So it has to have a beginning, right? And so in this theory, they then reflected upon themselves, the divine Trinity, and in doing so became the creative Trinity and pierced a hole in infinity to create this new realm of eternity that has a beginning and no ending. And in this eternal realm at the center of creation, everything's created in its perfect divine blueprint. The one great self fragmented into 12 aspects of its personality. And you might think of the zodiac wheel. And in doing so, created the original 12 archetypes, which then split into male, female, and became the original 24 elders. As these eternal children were created in this eternal realm, they too wanted to experience the 12 personalities of thyself. And so they fragmented into these 12 archetypal patterns, which become the 12 personalities of self. They also got restless and wanted to experience themselves in a different way, the existential reality of eternity just existing and being. They wanted to create a different way of to know thyself, and got this concept around experiencing. Right. And so they projected this mental construct called space time, where they could know thyself through experience and experiential realms of time and space, and projected 12 dimensions and then 12 aspects of their personality in each of the 12 dimensions to give us 144 soul extensions, or the monad that Theosophy talks about. So why that all may seem very sort of complex, it's really quite simple. If we think of 3D, for instance, and that here in the third dimension, we may be expressing all 12 signs of ourselves in 12 different timelines.
Right.
And so here I am in 2021 as a Virgo, but I may be, you know, in ancient times, or in 1600 or 1800 as a Sagittarius or a Leo. And so this concept really resonated with me.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I got a hold of, I'm sure you experienced this before, you get obsessed with something. There's like, and I would have almost dreams about the number 12. And that's why it's such a powerful question for me. And I was speaking at a conference probably like 4 years ago called Victory of Light in Ohio, and preparing for that, and 12 just kept on coming up. And so I ran across Charles Fillmore's book, The 12 Mind Powers of Man, and he parallels that with the 12 disciples. And he's very Christian, but then you can parallel that to most of the pantheons, you know, the Greek pantheons, the zodiac sign, the 12 tribes of Israel. And I'm like, there's something with this. And to me, this is about resonating with these in the timelines that they're in, and then activating the light body, which you're the epicenter of that, and bringing those all into oneness. And so it's that's why I thought that was very profound that you're going there. And I haven't ran across a lot of people talking about that, other than in small little fragments of it, or symbolism of it. Even in Madame Blavatsky, I've read her, and so it's just a very interesting concept, because I think what we're looking for is ascension and ascending into a higher state of being. And you know, I think that we're all just on this journey to get there. Sometimes we do really well, and sometimes there's times where I'm like, "Ooh, don't get this at all." But I think that we just laugh at ourselves and move on, and learn from it. So very, very cool. So perception is reality, according to Einstein. So we can perceive a higher dimensional realm as our new reality if we focus our attention there. And I thought that's a very interesting question. And can you talk more about that and what that means to you?
Yes, I believe that moving out of the third dimensional cube, that we have, in a sense, become trapped in this reality of duality, which we volunteered to come into to learn the lessons that only a 3D reality of duality can teach us. But some are done learning through separation and suffering, and the aspects that define a third dimensional reality, and they're ready to ascend into a different version of reality, out of separation and into unity, out of suffering and into peace and harmony. And it's simply a matter of shifting your perception out of that separation and suffering, if you will, and into unity and peace and harmony. And when you shift your perception and you start focusing on creating your own reality in that way, surrounding yourself by with like-minded beings who are also focused on creating unity and peace and harmony on the planet, that you actually start to experience that type of reality unfolding around you. I believe that we can literally raise our love light frequency through spiritual practices. Just start to focus on being the highest version of your best self through kindness and compassion and selfless service to the light and love of humanity, that you then start shifting out of the third dimensional spectrum of perception, and you literally start experiencing your reality from a higher dimensional perspective, shifting into the next spectrum. You see each of these dimensions being in a certain spectrum or frequency, right? And the more that you focus on that higher dimensional perspective, you start shifting into that 5D way of living and being. And I believe ultimately you completely shift out of the third dimensional reality and find yourself in what we would call a fifth dimensional reality.
So you bring up a lot of amazing points there, because I'm thinking like a lot of times and I think this kind of sort of comes back to quantum physics as well. A lot of times people are looking for a change in their world. Let's even just take it down to their life, their personal life. And but they're still focused in on everything that is bad going on, whatever's causing them their grief, their anguish, or their pain, or whatever. And when you focus in on the higher aspects of yourself, love, compassion, gratitude, being of service, those kind of things, then and your focus is not on what is bringing you anguish and pain, then from what I'm understanding, what you're saying is that we're going to start shifting our frequency into a higher state of consciousness. Or even, people will start thinking, well, if I had this, I would be happy. If I have this, or if this would happen in the world, then I would be happier, and the whole world would be happier. And if they'll keep them in this third dimensional duality. But if they start focusing in on, bringing peace to having peace within themselves and peace on the planet, then they're going to start shifting themselves, and and eventually it's going to shift the planet. I think they say in the Bible, 2 or more gather in my name, then the Father shall be with you, which really just means 2 or more in this higher dimensional state of being, in higher consciousness, then we'll shift, a greater sense of the consciousness. So I just want to make sure I'm on the same page as you. So
Yes, I mean, it was beautifully expressed, Jeremy, and that's exactly true. Where our attention goes, energy flows, right? And so the more that you attain your own inner peace, happiness, and joy through gratitude and compassion and kindness, and that means toward yourself and others, that you start to find yourself experiencing more of that, because that is where your attention is focused. It's like turning away from the shadows and looking into the light and stepping into that light. And as you do that more and more and more, you find yourself surrounded more by light and love. And I do believe that ultimately, we will create that split or shift out of the third dimensional timeline into the fifth dimensional timeline, for those who are focused on it and those who are ready for that ascension, because not everyone is ready. Not everyone's done learning the valuable lessons in a reality of duality. But for those who are done learning in that way, and they're ready to ascend into a new way of learning and living and being, then focusing on the light of love and practicing, consciousness raising meditations and visualizations and sound healing, will shift them into that new higher dimensional way of living and being.
I really appreciate this, because it's one of those things where in the last year, 2020, I said 2020 was about 2020 vision. And Now, at the beginning of 2020, I didn't know what that looked like. I had like all these speaking gigs, set up, and I was going to go traveling, which I'd mentioned to you before we started recording that I love traveling. And so, and then it kind of went through, obviously we know the direction of the way 2020 went. And I started getting caught up and even got depressed for the first time in like 10 years. I'd actually gotten to the sense of loneliness. I hadn't experienced loneliness in 10 or 11 years. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And it's because I got caught up in the duality consciousness for about a month. I was just literally in that space. It was the weirdest feeling I'd had in a long time. And I'm grateful for going there. And so, because what it did, and I think, and I'm speaking about this because I think there's a lot of people that went through this. I even know a lot of spiritual teachers that went through this. And then I started getting caught in between my friends politically, because I've never been an overly political person, and about making a choice. And I'm like, that's just not who I am. And so finally, I just, I realized if I'm not living in this now of the moment, and the now of the moment is where I need to be, then I'm out. And the now of the moment is where I can raise my consciousness, where I can be grateful for this moment, for the air in my lungs. And, and Suzanne, it was interesting. I didn't really lose friends, but a lot of people don't want to talk to me right now because I just don't want to get involved with their ideas. And I'm sure you can relate to this of what is right or wrong for them. And so to me, I just thought, if I'm not living in the now of the moment, then that's not a happy place for me, unless it's in the now of the moment. And so that's a hard thing to explain to people. And I think that the only way we can change it is by working on ourselves, and like you mentioned, being compassionate, kind, and understanding, and listen. And then there's some times where I just have to cut it off because I don't want to hear it anymore. And so I'll be like, all right, have a good day. And so, and you just kind of move on. But I thank you for bringing that point up, because I think that that's really, the planet is in very much, it is about 2020 vision. And then 2021 is a 5, really, when you think of 2 and 2, or 4 and 5, and that's about change. We're in a change year. And I think that's a really powerful, wonderful place to be. And so,
thank you for bringing up those points. I just had a retreat last weekend, and I had over 50 people come here to Sedona, and we all gathered as a spiritual community, and we had 15 speakers, presenters, practitioners, and performers. And the main theme was on that topic exactly, about focusing on the light of love and how we can selflessly serve the light, and looking away from the shadows and into the light. And my discussion was particularly focused on walking that line between, having an awareness about what's unfolding on the planet so that you can make informed decisions, but not attaching to it, being aware that where your attention goes, energy flows. And so, while you want to have some awareness, you want to be focused on the light. Because the more that you focus on the dark agenda that may be unfolding on the planet, the more that you perpetuate that. And, I was talking about how, if there are dark forces on the planet involved in this new world order, dark agenda, they feed off of not just fear, but resentment and blame and anger. And, and so if we look to that and focus too much of our attention and energy on that, then we actually are perpetuating it and helping to create that unfoldment. And then we're part of that, right? And so just really staying focused on co-creating a new earth, and a new earth agenda where unity and peace and harmony prevail in the creation of sovereignty, and communities that are self-sustaining, where the new earth can unfold in a spiritual way.
Yeah, powerful stuff. I really appreciate it. And Suzanne, is there anything like I always ask this question of my guests, is there anything that you would like to bring up for the listeners or viewers that maybe I didn't ask or we didn't bring up over the last half hour that you'd like to take a few minutes to talk about?
Thank you for asking. And so I do live here in the spiritual Mecca of Sedona, and I always like to invite people to come here. This is a powerful vortex, and I take people out on spiritual journeys in the vortex of Sedona. Underneath Sedona are volcanic shafts, and this spiraling electromagnetic energy explodes onto the surface, creating these spiraling vortices. Within these spiraling vortices, there's a very high frequency of higher consciousness, and it's very conducive to having a profound, transformative spiritual experience. And so I invite people to come out here and go on a spiritual journey with me in Sedona. Also, I am a psychic reader and energy healer, and I do those types of sessions both online and live here at a healing center in Sedona. Of course, I have my books, and each of my books contains audio downloads of meditations and initiations and activations. And so I invite people to tune in to that as well. I also have created an internet TV network called SciSpy.tv, SCISPI.tv, and we now have 6 channels and over 30 shows.
Wow.
And so I invite people to check out our network as well. And so all of that can be found on my website, SuzanneRossWellness.com. And I just like to invite people to connect with me. You can also connect with me at my email address, which is SuzanneRoss64@yahoo.com.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And everybody, as always, Soul Talk is on the 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday evening, and here on the YouTube channel, and then it will be on the LA Tribune TV on Roku. It takes about a couple days for them to get that uploaded, but it's you can watch it on demand there as well. So everybody, much love, and go check out Suzanne Ross. Is it Suzanne Wellness? I'm gonna pull it up here because I'm gonna say it wrong. SuzanneRossWellness.com. That is in the comments or in the description of the show. Go check out her books. Check out this book, which is called Rise Up: Awakening Through Revelation. And I think that you will enjoy it. The parts I have read of it have been amazing, and I'm going to go back and read the whole thing and go through the adventures, the daily adventures, because I think that that's what spirituality is all about, is enjoying life and going on an adventure. And so one of the things that I think is amazing, Suzanne, is metaphysics is an adventure. When you start practicing things like remote viewing and stuff like that, and you actually have it happen for the first time, that's a pretty incredible thing. Even if it's on the other side of your couch, you're on the other part of your room, or astral projection, or you're walking out. You mentioned walking out in nature, and I've had birds stop flying in the middle of the in mid-flight, and I'm like, how does that happen? Well, it's because of what we just talked about over the last half hour. And so those things are an adventure. And everybody enjoy your adventure, and much love, and have a great day.